I am a little bit embarrassed to receive this award because I am such a latecomer to this issue in many ways. Pure Earth, I have admired because of the pivotal role that you've played in tackling one of the greatest and most solvable public health crises we have. Congratulations to Ethan Sawyer, the board chair, who's going to also receive an award later. My career has been one in surgery and public health, a weird combination of things, but it led to my being asked to lead global health at USAID in 2021. I came to USAID and discovered it's the best job in medicine that I have ever had and that you've likely never heard of. I got to lead 2,500 people in 65 countries, deploying assistance from the United States with a singular goal of maximally reducing premature death and protecting the homeland against outbreaks and diseases. That work over the last 20 years saved 92 million lives. Now, the budgets we had were earmarked for what the top issues identified, often many years ago, has turned out to be. They were focused, our funds were focused on HIV, TB, and malaria, which continue to be significant scourges but have come under dramatically different levels of control. They were about reducing deaths in childbirth, pneumonia, diarrhea, and so on. Samantha Power was our administrator, our leader on the National Security Council and leading USAID. And, you know, normally you would say, you do what you're budgeted to do. But the question that she was pushing was, what are we missing? I know Congress is not funding us to do everything that's most important. What are the most important life-saving issues? One issue that I had made one of my signature goals is simply primary care as a system that we need in the United States to work properly, but is among the most effective life-saving vehicles for driving improvements in survival. But she had also tasked Garrett Lamb, sitting here in front, as a young special assistant who was asked, what are the other interventions we're missing? And his review identified that it's been long recognized that there are policy interventions that have enormous impact, and lead is at near the top of that list. He came to see me, and I said, we're going to take this on. This is awesome, because I was part of a World Bank project that ranked the issues more than 10 years ago that are the most neglected areas of health, of addressing for health and survival and impairment. And lead was near the top of that list. The data that you heard has become even more staggering than we'd understood when we did that World Bank ranking more than 15 years ago. 1 in 2 children in low middle income countries have severe elevations in levels of lead equivalent to lead poisoning. 90% of the problem of lead toxicity is in low middle income countries. The most compelling data to me is some of the education data, that a child with a lead level over 5 milligrams, which is not the most toxic levels, has a 6-point reduction in IQ. You have entire countries getting a 6-point reduction in IQ. What does that mean? You're moving the IQ curve 6 points to the left. That results in a 60% increase in your intellectually disabled population and a 60% decrease in your gifted population. That is devastating for your society. That is devastating for economies. We have seen recent U.S. evidence of the impact. We de-leaded gasoline, and it caused an enormous effect in lowering U.S. Lead levels. That was in the 70s. But NASCAR did not stop using lead gasoline until 2007. And when they stopped, that became a natural experiment for us to understand what the impact was. And so researchers studied kids who lived within 50 miles of a NASCAR racetrack and measured their lead levels and found they were elevated, not as high as 5 milligrams, a couple milligrams. But there is no safe lead level. And by taking away, just running a race on the weekend would put enough lead into the air that it would poison the kids for 50 miles around. And the result was that taking that away ended up raising math and reading scores at every grade level and for every level of achievement, from the most talented to the most struggling kids. The equivalent gains were as big as the biggest school reforms that we carry out. It was the same as increasing class sizes. It was the equivalent of making a $750 per pupil investment in upgrading the teaching quality. And that was in our own communities. You could imagine what that's doing around the world. And then there came this new data in the last decade that has been extraordinary, showing that lead is driving both high blood pressure at much higher levels than we understood, and directly causing atherosclerosis, resulting in stroke, kidney disease, heart attacks. The American Heart Association now added lead as a major risk factor for cardiovascular disease alongside cholesterol and alongside smoking. That is how high and significant the impact is on non-communicable disease coming from lead. You heard about the massive underinvestment, only $15 million coming from philanthropy and international foreign assistance. And so we went, Garrett and I, to Samantha and made the case that this is, in fact, one of her leadership opportunities. It was tractable, it was massive impact, and it was underinvested. It's complex. One of the things that we've come to recognize is it's even a threat to our own country. Drew gave the example of Georgia, where there were where they tested the lead levels in their whole country and then traced it to spices. That was because in New York City, an outbreak of lead poisoning appeared in children in New York, and they traced it to spices coming from Georgia. They alerted Georgia, and that had led to their response. We've seen this from cinnamon coming from Latin America. We have seen this from pottery coming from Mexico. This is an issue that ends up coming home. I visited many countries. I had 37 international trips during my time leading Global Health at USAID. And one of them was to Thailand, and I visited with their equivalent of the CDC, where they've made enormous progress in lead levels. And what fascinated me was their approach. They took one of their teams that did outbreak response, a team of just 3 people, and shifted them over to do lead toxicity response. They had national level, not a totally representative survey, but they were tracking child lead levels, but they'd also required that workers in high-risk industries get lead levels paid for by their employers. And then they got these reports of high lead levels in children and in workplaces. And then they would do an investigation, just the same way they would investigate an infectious outbreak. And then they'd say, what were the sources? And they would find many, but they would tackle them. And it was a game of whack-a-mole for a while. You know, the big noodle pot, the biggest selling pot in Thailand, turned out to have metal that had lead in it and was poisoning people. There was lead acid batteries, there was paint. But one by one, they were knocking these down in communities as measures came up, and their 50% rate of high lead levels in children dropped to 20%, and they've now set the goal of achieving it at a 5% level. We saw that there was tractability, that there were starting to be solutions, and what we saw that was missing was there was no concerted global movement. Pure Earth was doing incredible work, fighting for 25 years to get this on the agenda of governments. One thing we have learned about how you bring issues to become globally tractable. We've done it with polio as we near eradication. We've done it with tobacco. We've done it with seatbelts. We've done it with drunk driving. How does this happen? There is a concept called field catalysts, and those are organizations that are capable to do a few key things. One, drive people to convene around a clearly defined problem. Those people need to come from governments, need to be able to come from private sector and philanthropy, need to come from industry, need to come from science and academia, need to come from tech. You need someone who has the convening power to pull those people together and to mobilize around a big issue. Second, they need to have the truth. They need to be able to measure what is the actual truth of progress. Are you succeeding? Are you failing in an undeniable way? And then they need a playbook to understand what you need to do and drive demand around making it happen. There was nothing like that, but there were incredible actors moving in the field: Pure Earth, Bloomberg, Open Philanthropy, EPA, UNICEF, and many others. And so what we saw as the opportunity was to found a partnership for a lead-free future that set a clear goal, and we worked very closely with Kathy Russell, the leader of UNICEF, who made this a mission at UNICEF to band together all of the UN agencies working together and then bring together what has already become, under Abdullah's leadership, Omar Abdi, my friend at UNICEF as well, 31 governments, 18 major philanthropies and private sector organizations, 28 NGOs that have committed to making a lead-free future. That is what has enabled us to see a future that could actually happen. Open Philanthropy came in with the commitment for more than $100 million, what became $150 million, and tenfold increased the funding in this area. You heard today about the commitment of Bloomberg Philanthropies, and there's more that can come along the way. World Bank has made a $500 million commitment for governments that prioritize beginning to address these issues. So I will finish just by saying I'm embarrassed to get this honor because we did a small part. USAID has been dismantled and is not continuing this work. But by creating this coalition, it's meant that even if one actor disappears, even one as big as USAID and the US government, that others are all there pulling together in the same direction, ready to make this happen. I'm delighted to be here. I'm so glad about the Partnership for a Lead-Free Future and what it's making possible, even as multilateralism is in retreat. This work, at a time of collapse of many parts of public health, is the rare bright spot. And thank you, thank you, thank you.